When you are working collaboratively, you've got to be mindful of the fact that others are going to be updating and changing the document as well. So if you have shared the document and if you're in the suggestion mode and you're coming in and if you're making some changes to the document, they come in and they see the changes, they accept the changes, and maybe they make some of their own changes. And then when you go into the document, you might not see that these changes have been made. But luckily for us, there is a versioning with Google Docs, and this is automatically done. So this is a new doc that we just created, going under File and going halfway down to Version History. You've got an option to name the current version, and it is suggested that whenever you make some major revisions and that once those revisions are complete, if this is a draft version or a significant version, give it a name. And also if you've made some significant changes, give it a name so that way that can easily be referenced. So I'm going to just give this one a name, current today, and actually it should be a more meaningful name, but you can give it a name for anything that makes sense. And that way, when you go into the version history and you go see version history, and there's also a shortcut for that, you can see that what work has been done today, who's done it, and it's also referring to the different user accounts. Green refers to the changes made by that account. The current version, I can see that these are all the changes that were made, and the color is going to correspond with the user that made the changes. You can also revert back to other versions, so just selecting those versions, and at the top you're going to get an option to revert back. Then this is just reverting back to the completely plain document. So that's why it is important to update and name your versions. And then if you want to see only the named versions, you can toggle the switch here at the top, and this will show you all of the named versions. And also if we update and if we can rename that, so if the current version doesn't make sense, so if we have draft V1 or V2, whatever we want to call it, so whatever makes sense, we can always rename it. And we can also remove name, so we can completely remove the name from it as well, and it'll just revert back to the current time. And then whenever you set the name for it, and I'm just going to call it draft V2, it's going to go in the named versions. You can also make a copy of the version so that if you want to update it, you can make different copies of the version. You can also toggle the show changes at the bottom. So this will show the changes made by the various users. So I'm going to go in using my other account, name current version. So this will also give us something if we want to revert back to the other one. And I'll call it Lawrence 2 draft version 2. So this is going to be a different draft version than Lawrence 1 is using. So if I go back in and if I see the version and I want to see the current versions, I can see that this is the one that Lawrence 2 draft version 2. So this was a significant change. And because the Lawrence default account is being referenced with purple, I can see the changes that were applied. And even though that these weren't done within the suggested mode, I can still see the changes that were made because it's been saved within the version history. So there is a difference between this version and that version, and it will indicate what has been changed. And because these two are named versions, if I only want to see the major named versions, so instead of just the default saves that Google is doing, then I can switch to and I can toggle just to see the named versions. So when you are collaborating with documents, make sure that you've discussed how you are going to be handling the versioning. And if you ever want to go back to a previous version, it's really easy to do. You're going to have all of the versions, and that's why it's a good idea to have the significant changes as named versions so that you can select it. And then at the top left-hand corner, you're going to see the restore this version, and then you can restore this version as the active version. So even if the other user is opening, they're going to get that version, that whatever the current version is, and we've got the restored version. But not to worry if we ever did make a mistake and we've reverted back to an earlier version, but we want to be using the Lawrence 2 draft version 2. So after I've talked to my second account and that second account says, no, this is the one that we should be using, we can always select it and restore back to that version. And you also see what's happening here when we see the version history, that there's a number of versions that are being created. So every time there's a significant change, Google automatically creates a version, and these versions do get stored for a little while. You're not going to be able to always be able to access all of them. They will get disappear and they will get deleted. And that's why I do say that once you create a named version, that's not going to get deleted. So that's going to be sure to be there if you ever have to revert back to it.